Welcome to another Beyond All Reason video. It's Jaws Munch here, and today we're going to be doing a look at Armada bots for a tier list here. Now, previously we did a Cortex tier list, and now we're just going to be doing Armada bots. So, we'll say if we get to 65 likes on this video, then I will fast track the next tier list that I will be doing personally on this channel. So if you guys want to see that quickly, definitely be sure to like the video, and we will get that out for you guys. So first off, we've got the Tick here. The Tick is a very, very fast scouting unit and is really one of the best units in the game. Honestly, it is going to have to go to S tier. It's very good at harassing early, taking out mexes, taking out even pawns. I believe it has some of the best DPS per metal cost in the entire game. So even in late game, this unit is very, very valuable, as it can block sniper fire, it can cause distraction for artillery and longer range weapons to keep your heavier, bulkier units safe while pushing in. So the Tick is definitely going in S tier. Its one weakness is a Juno missile, but usually that's not very cost effective unless there's a very large group of them. Next up, we got the Res bot, the Lazarus. This is going to be very similar to the Cortex Resbot. They recently got a nerf actually in the game, so they're not quite as powerful early on as they used to be. You used to just get one of these out and just suck up all your reclaim and all of your energy, whatever metal that's scattered across the map, energy scattered across the map, and it would be extremely valuable for that. But they did increase the cost slightly and increase the build time. So if you do pump one of these out early, it's going to be a little bit, it will end up slowing down the amount of units you can crank out as quickly early on. So it's something you have to play with a little bit more, and I think the meta is still adjusting to the shift we found with these units. So I'm going to put it in A tier. Normally it would be S tier, but just because it's kind of uncertain where it's going to be placed now as far as usefulness and how often they come out early, I'm going to put it in A tier for now. We got the Rocket Bot. I honestly don't like the Armada Rocket Bot as much as the Cortex, because these guys for some reason struggle with shooting over walls. And if you guys have seen any of my videos, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of being able to line rocket bots up along a T1 wall and being able to fire them out into against your opponent, because then incoming fire is largely blocked from those walls. And the rocket bot struggles a lot with, for some reason, the Armada rocket bot struggles with shooting over those walls like 90% of the time that I use it. So I'm going to actually put Armada rocket bots in B tier, just because they can't be used in a disadvantaged way. So like if you're behind, the walls can help you get ahead again, but you can't do that so well with the Armada rocket bots, unfortunately. Next, we have the crossbow. This is anti-air. Honestly, most anti-air just goes straight to B tier, because it's almost all the anti-air in Beyond All Reason is quite expensive, and if there's a large cluster of air units, it's very tough to deal with them. So these are mainly going to be used for taking out Shuri or chipping away at Banshees and such, and they do okay, but they're not, they're not the best. They just barely tickle away at the air. So they're more of a slight protection against air harassment, essentially. Not the best like overall defense for air. So I'm going to put that in B tier. We got the Pawn here. Pawn is going to be A tier. Very, very good unit, very fast, has a decent line of sight, although it does have a little bit less than the Grunt. So it has a high DPS of 90 damage per second, which is very, I think it beats off the Mace quite a bit in damage. I think the Mace has 60 damage per second, and it beats the Rocco in damage. The Rocco has, I think, like 50 damage per second or something like that. So it is one of the higher damage per second units. It just has limited range, but the speed makes up for that, and it recently got a little bit of a buff over the grunt, so now the grunt is a little bit slower than the pawn, and there's a lot more viability in 1v1s with the pawn than there used to be. So definitely going in A tier. Mace, I would have normally put in C tier, but they recently got a buff in metal and I believe a buff in health, which will probably put it in B tier. I think I know I've seen a lot of them being used now, whereas before they were almost never touched in competitive games. So that is a shift that I think we need to still be watching to see if it kind of stays that way or if it's just reactionary. It might end up going to A tier if it ends up being very, very common for the mace to just be used all the time. But for now, we're just going to put it in B tier just because I'm not sure where it's going to end up fitting and settling in as people adjust to the changes that it received. The Centurion, this is kind of a little bit of a situational unit, in my opinion. It used to be just straight up D tier. Honestly, I never really used it that way. I would try to make it meta, but it just was so bad. I like to test things, and so I was trying to test to see if the Centurion was decent. And they are okay, but they are not very effective when it comes to pushing commanders. They have a lot of health. They have a lot of DPS. But in order to get the maximum DPS with them, you have to be right on top of your enemy. So when it comes to taking out commanders, they really struggle a lot with that. But when it comes to holding off units like the pawn and the tick, they excel because of how fast their fire rate is. So I'm going to put this actually in B tier due to a change that they made in the targeting of it. The targeting was improved quite a bit, so now it is able to rapidly adjust its targets, and that does increase its benefit. So Mace and Centurion are going to be B tier. By the way, a lot of the Armada bots, in my opinion, are B tier, A tier. Very few of them will end up reaching S tier, and that is because Armada bots just have a lot of they're very tactical, and a lot of them are somewhat situational, and they can't just push through. A lot of them actually need support to be able to make it further in the battlefield. A lot of these guys will become obsolete once you hit late mid game. Okay. Tumbleweed is a very situational unit. It has a very low health pool compared to like the type of damage you're receiving when you start using it. It is meant to be an anti-C, like a C mine that you could just roll into the opponent's boats. And so it's not really designed for land combat. I'm going to put it in a C tier because the usability kind of falls off as you go to the land. And I mean, it's good for C, especially if they don't have a lot of anti-sub or like depth charge type of fire. The Tumbleweed is going to be very, very strong, but it's kind of situational in that way as well. Radar bot and the radar jammer are both A tier. Very, very good at, they provide excellent range for being able to, like snipers or hounds, really good range so that you can get accurate damage off. And then the radar jamming is really, really excellent at hiding the position of your bots that you do have. And I think I originally put these in B tier or C tier in my other tier list, but for Armada in particular, they are definitely A tier, just based on what you have in your possession and what you can use. So, yeah, very good, but can easily be shut down by Junos. And one thing that's very common would be a hound mixture with some radar bots and radar jamming bots, and that was very, very strong for a very long time. I'm seeing it a lot less now but it still is a common place item that you'll see, a commonplace composition. So we got the we got the ghost here. This is definitely S tier. Both spy bots for both factions are extremely powerful, able to stun by exploding themselves, and that EMP stuns for like 13 seconds, which is very, very powerful. You can take out a large pool of artillery units with just stunning and then pushing on them. So very, very effective. Definitely recommend. Sprinter. Yeah, someone's got to go in D tier, and that's you, buddy. Honestly, sprinters, I cannot like them. They cost a decent amount of metal. They're about as expensive as a fiend, if I remember correctly, and they just are complete garbage in compared to fiends. The only thing they have going for them is their speed. So I would recommend that if I was to ever build them, I would build them only for the purpose of going through an area where there was 0 frontline and trying to sprint my way back into the back line where the economy is. So that is the only time I would ever use them, is to gain ground as rapidly as possible and hit the economy. If there was no hole in the front line, if everything was largely protected, even if there was like 10 light laser turrets, I wouldn't send these through, because they're just they have low HP, they have low DPS, honestly, they have really low range, but they are very fast. So kind of a garbage unit in my opinion. They might need to even look at reworking them, because compared to the Fiend, they just don't do justice to the metal cost, in my opinion. Butler, we're gonna put actually an A tier, actually maybe even S tier. Butlers are extremely strong for upgrading your mexes. So like when you first get out T2, you can get like 3 butlers to follow your T2 out and help upgrade your mexes, and they have a lot of build power that's mobile, so you're able to just follow that around and upgrade very rapidly. So in that way, I think it's very, very good. Now, that's not the only thing they're really good for. They also are extremely good at recovering from a devastating event. So if your economy gets shredded and you lose your APHIS, you lose your fusion, you lose all of your build power, but you have 10 butlers, you're going to be able to recover rapidly compared to if you didn't have any. And because the butler is known for making massive wind farms very, very rapidly, they can make massive amounts of T1 energy converters rapidly, so you're just able to multiply your economy pretty quickly after hitting a massive setback. So very, very good unit. I'm going to put him in A tier, just because he is still situational. You're not going to want to build him every single game, but he is very good. Then we got the Weber. Weber's going to be S tier, above the Resbot. And the reason he is going S tier is because it's like having a Resbot that can stun and have like, it's an EMP Resbot, essentially. Not to mention the mountain climbing. I don't know if you've ever been on a map where there's a lot of mountainous terrain and something dies up on the mountains, and you go to do like a reclaim field in a certain area, and all of your Resbots reclaim everything up until the point where they reach the mountain. And then at the point where there's that one little bit of reclaim on the mountain, they get stuck there. That will not happen with the Weber. He is able to climb the mountains and reclaim anything in his path, while also having an EMP cannon that he will fire off on units that are pushing in. So he won't die to ticks. He won't die to pawns. He's much more he has a larger amount of survivability on the map compared to the Lazarus. So a very, very strong unit. And you can even put him in combination with Webers, I believe, or with Recluse. I find Recluse Weber combination with just like 1 Weber per 6 Recluse or something is very, very powerful, because you're able to do a fight command, push all of the Recluse, firing down rockets, and then the Weber cleans up all of your corpses and all of the enemy corpses, leaving 0 reclaim for the enemy to get to. So it's a very, very powerful unit. Platypus. I don't think the Platypus is quite as good as the Duck. I don't personally use it that much, if ever. So I'm going to put him C tier. He is strong for doing unexpected pushes across water, but it's still, you know, very situational, kind of like the tumbleweed, where you don't use him every game. He's not going to be as effective as cranking out a bunch of hounds or cranking out a bunch of snipers. He's at land-to-land combat. He's just not there as far as effectiveness goes. So definitely a C tier unit, in my opinion. But if you use him in the right situation, crossing different water terrain, he can be an S. He can feel S tier, even though he's actually C tier. Right? Okay. Welder, we're gonna put in B tier. Welder is very, very powerful at shutting down spam. So if you have a million ticks trying to harass your snipers or pawns trying to harass your snipers, he does a chain reaction damage to all of. I don't remember how many units it actually chain reacts to, but he is very good at wiping out light spammy units, and he also has a decent health pool, I believe, of like 2,000 3,000 health or something like that. Very, very strong, very, very tanky. It might be more than that. I can't remember. But yeah, definitely a support unit meant for shredding spam that is trying to leak into your snipers or into your hounds. Units that might not be quite as efficient at taking out light spammy units like that. And then we got the hound. This is going to be I want to put him in S tier, but part of me knows he belongs in A tier. We're going to put him in S tier. No, A tier. So I want to put him in S tier, but he just falls off over time, and that's the problem. The hound is extremely powerful early T2, like very early T2. He's unstoppable. Very, very powerful. He has very long range, and he even is very effective in the mid game, like late mid game. He can be very effective. It's just he begins to be outranged, and they don't have the DPS to handle like a heavy push, and they don't have the health pool to take the hits. So they do start to fall off late game. So I'm not going to put him in S tier, even though part of me really wants to. You can win very early with a few hounds. You just have to be careful because your range can start to fall off, and you don't have the DPS to act, or the health pool to actually push in and do a damage against some of the T2 defenses that will start to come up. Recluse would, I believe, have originally been in the A tier, but I believe they got a nerf a long time ago. They used to be the meta where some of the pros would only push Recluse out on the battlefield, but that was before I even started making content, so I can't really judge on that. I wasn't really playing Bar a lot during that time, but apparently that was a thing, or at least that's what I've heard. Recluse we're going to put in B tier. Very, very powerful. When in combination with the Weber, extremely strong. They have anti-EMP as well, so they don't get stunned from Shuris. So if you want to, I mean, they can get stunned from Shuris, but it takes like, what, 30 Shuris to be able to push in and stun down a Recluse. They're very effective at snowballing, and that's why they're so good with combination with the Weber, because you can maintain your snowball by constantly multiplying your metal that you have in your production, and they just go really well together. It's a great way to push out of canyon. If you have if you're like stuck in canyon and glitters, they're very effective at pushing out. So definitely recommend these units. They're even good at flat terrain too. I mean, they are spiders, so they are all terrain, but they're very effective at flat terrain as well. Archangel, I'm going to put it, actually, I said I was putting both anti-air in B tier, but Archangel's going C tier. They cost more and they're less effective. That's the thing with a lot of anti-air. A lot of anti-air buildings and units are just really expensive and don't do justice. That's why you'll see in 1v1s, a lot of people will build just an air lab instead of building a bunch of anti-air. And that's because the anti-air for all the factions is just so expensive with such little effectiveness. You know, you have to have the actual fighters to deal with an air raid that might come. And so, yeah, these are just something that you put in to help with ground or to chip away at the enemy air. So say you take your front line and push it forward a bit, you can chip away at that airline until they pull it back a little bit. So that's really what these are mainly used for. And they can take the edge off of a bombing run, but they're not going to be able to stop one. So just kind of lackluster, not a good answer, not a good response to air. Then we got the gunslinger. We're gonna put him in S tier. That's a joke, by the way. The gunslinger. I've wanted the gunslinger. If anyone has been around and like paid attention to my content for a while, you've known that I've tried to play the gunslinger a lot. I've tried to like him and use him frequently, but honestly, gunslinger is like a C tier. As far as should you build him if you're new to the game, should you build him frequently? No. Oftentimes, the only time you will want to build the slinger is if you are currently very ahead and you believe that you can abuse his healing. So, like, if you're behind, you definitely don't want to build the slinger. It's just really bad. If you're dealing, because he gets outranged very easily. He's not super tanky, but he can scale as he kills things. And so that's the only benefit really to him, is that he scales as you kill things, but oftentimes you'll just see him die before he can scale. I honestly believe, this is my personal opinion, that in order for the slinger to be seen on the battlefield, they're going to have to increase his movement speed by a bit, or increase his range by a bit, something. Because right now we just don't see him being used effectively. He's not that great. Next, we got the Fat Boy. This guy, honestly, I believe S tier. He's not used frequently. I think we need to see him used a bit more than he is currently. But in support, if he is supported well, he does amazing damage. Amazing damage. He is very tanky. He's about, I think he's one of the tankiest units that Armada has. But he is metal expensive. He does have good range though. And so that's the thing. Like the Shockbot has that tankiness factor, but doesn't have the range to really be viable towards late game. Whereas the Fat Boy has the range required and some of the tankiness, but is a little bit more expensive. Definitely something you want to support heavily, and I would just add them to your mix of maybe Recluse. Actually, this is something I've done just a couple days ago. I did a Recluse Weber mix, and then I added like one Fat Boy into that mix. So as the Recluses are shutting things down, the Webers are stunning and eating reclaim, the Fat Boy is taking chunks of damage out of the enemy while being supported. So he is a support unit, but he's a very powerful support unit. Marauder, S tier. He does fall off towards the late game, but many of us have probably experienced the Marauder rush, and there's timings you can do for the eco position where you get a certain amount of economy and then you just crank out Marauders at a certain time frame and then you just push them to the front heavy and hard. And those guys can push. They're very, very fast. They can go underwater, so their terrain maneuverability is fantastic, and they can just go straight to the back line, push through T2 defenses, and just wreck economies. So very, very powerful. If you see a bunch of these coming, there's always going to be a little ounce of fear in your heart. You know, you're going to be a little nervous about it. Definitely S tier in my opinion. The Vanguard, I'm going to put A tier. He is very strong. He does have a very long range. And in the right positions, he's very powerful, but he's not really, like, this is the thing with a lot of the Armada units. They don't have a lot of good front line holding units, if that makes sense. Like this guy, you're not going to want him to take hits. He's an artillery piece. He's supposed to be in the back. And that's the case with a lot of these. Like, this guy can take hits. This guy can take hits. This guy can take hits. Those are T1. This guy can't really take hits. He's not meant to take a bunch of hits. And that's what Armada's faction is designed for. You know, it's designed to be a lot more strategic. This guy, you can take hits, but not a ton of hits. You got to be cautious with him. And he's very slow. most of these guys are just really, fragile units. So it's tough. Same with the Vanguard. The Vanguard's not meant to take hits, although it does have a decent health pool. But it compared to other T3, it is not the strongest out there. It does have a bit of a health fall off, but the range, it's there for the range. Then we got the Sniper. Sniper is immediate S tier in my opinion. Very powerful. You need the energy to be able to shoot. You need the energy to be able to cloak. Those are both effective things you can do. But in combinations with radar jamming and radar bots, snipers are almost unmatched. You can't even eliminate these guys. You don't even need them. You can just build one sniper, cloak him, and then push him out into the front line, and he can be your vision. And just have him on hold fire, and have your other snipers on fire at will, and he will spot everything for you, and the other snipers will shoot everything down. So very, very powerful. Can easily shred T3 units. Definitely, when I see them on the battlefield, they are an immediate target, and that's because they can get really out of hand if there's a bunch of them. Titan, B tier. I would like it to be S tier, but it's just not. The Thor is the tanky T3 unit for Armada, and the Thor does so much better than the Titan at almost everything. The Titan is really good at heavy hitting one target. Think of it kind of like a walking pulsar. But oftentimes in late game, you're going to want to be able to shred a lot of T3 or a lot of T2. What on earth is going on here? My list just... give me a second, guys. I'll be back. Okay, sorry about that. Ads galore, apparently. I didn't know that it would send a pop-up ad and interrupt my video. Anyway, so yeah, the Thor can shred T2 units, shred T1 units. It has that chain reaction, whereas the Titan, it only has like 4 ways of firing. The 2 front pulse cannons, they're like plasma cannons, and so you can like shoot down T2 units pretty effectively, but once you get swarmed with a T1 units in combination with T2 units, you're just not going to be able to shoot them down that well. And then you have your pulsar tachyon laser up on the top. That cannon is able to shred heavy units such as other T3, and it has a decent range. And then you got a rocket cannon that comes off of your back, and that's more for taking out static defense, stuff like that. So it is good at taking out static defense. It is good at holding the front line. It does have a very large health pool, and it can self-destruct it into a big explosion if you need to. But compared to the Thor, it just is a little bit lackluster in actually dealing with the things that you really need to deal with in T3. Razorback. This one's probably going to be controversial because a lot of people really, really like the Razorback, and I do like him, but I'm going to put him in a B tier as well. In my opinion, the Razorback is only good at taking out spam. That's what it's designed to do, and it is very effective at taking out spam, but when it comes to heavy hitting units, such as the Bull, such as the Sniper, such as a Thor, it will die rapidly. It does not have the health required to be a pushing frontline unit. It is more of a support unit. And I always use them as support for that reason. They can actually take out air as well, which can be nice. On occasion, you need to take out air with them. But they're just not... They just fall off very rapidly. They don't have the speed of the Marauder. The one redeeming factor of the Marauder, even though they're weak, is the fact that they have a really good speed. And the Razorback they can be caught up to and handled, dealt with too easily, in my opinion. So you got to be careful when pushing with them because they can get lost. You can lose them pretty easily. They do have a lot of DPS. They are very, very intense DPS, like shredding machines. That is true, but their health pool doesn't help them sustain that DPS for too long. So yeah, not good at breaking the front lines in T2. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, definitely subscribe. We will be putting out more videos like this in the future. I am looking forward to doing another tier list. Like I said before, if we get to what did I say, 65 likes on this video, then I will be pumping out another tier list rapidly. If we don't, then I'll just wait a while. It'll probably be another like month or two before I get another one out. So thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Share it with someone who wants to learn some about Armada bots and their use cases, and we will see you guys on the battlefield.